Hello, viewers, and welcome to a team chat on WRC 8. My name's Alan, and I'm joined today by Kevin.
Hello.
And we're going to be talking about our first impressions on the game, essentially what I've seen so far, and showing you guys plenty of footage of the initial stages that some of you may have seen on the stream, but obviously see in a bit more detail here, played by other players as they're sort of learning their way around. Now, the first stage we're looking at is Turkey. And again, this is one of those that I really liked this stage from the off. Lots of detail. In fact, this wasn't the best stage. There's another one that we're going to see. Or no, we're not going to see, actually. It's in the trailer, of course. And it's just really impressive as you work your way up the mountain. You have this wonderful rock textures and stuff like that. We're going to dive in and out of talking about the video as we talk a bit about the game. But I think the first thing to talk about really is we saw that trailer earlier this year. WRC had 2 years out, essentially, by the time this game's released. And it really shows. You could tell that to develop a game of this scale, they needed the time. I think when you go back to WRC 5, they had, I don't know, 6 months to make a game, essentially. And then every year they had a mere few months out of that year to develop the next game and test it and move on and so on. And so with WRC 7, we really saw, I thought, a step change in terms of stage design and overall vision of where they were going. The technology was improving, game was improving, physics were improving, and it seemed logical to have this step, if you like, that gave them the time to produce more of these great stages, but to again improve the technology and improve everything there. We come back now, 14 locations, over 100 stages, and a rally game that really is looking the part. It really does look very impressive indeed. And so last week, then I popped to Kiloton to see the an early version, as we see Yanis here having a bit of trouble. It just shows, you clip a wall, you can end up in a tree. Do bear in mind, by the way, that these drivers have no co-driver, so they're learning the stage with no co-driver. Very tricky. This is a lot more difficult than it looks as well. Very rugged terrain and environment. I'm going to talk a bit about that when looking at Argentina in a moment. But go offline, and those bumps will. You really feel them, actually. It's really good force feedback and feeling as you're going over some of those bumps. You really feel the difference between different types of dirt there, stuff like that. He wasn't quite able to get the rear end into that. But either way, it's great to see such a big game. Kevin, you watched the stream last week. Let's talk a bit about that. What were your first impressions on the stream?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you say, the game's come a long way, hasn't it, since 5. 5 was the first game that Killerton took over from Milestone, and it was an okay effort. They built upon it with 6. Of course, we had the 1-to-1 super special stages, and of course 7 really sort of put things together with I mean, the stages were the star of the show, and it seems like from what I've seen so far on the stream and the preview footage here, that once again these stages are going to be the star of the show. They have some amazing rugged sections, as you can see here. You can see loads of little rocks lining the sort of outer edges of the track, really making it a hazard. So you really want to stay away from those edges, don't you? They really sort of built up with layers and layers of stone. I mean, it's amazing what they've achieved. Like you say, in the 2-year development cycle, it doesn't only bode well for this title, but for future titles this generation as well. So I mean, look at these views right now, Alan. It's quite something, isn't it?
Yeah, and you drive to those mountains in the distance. I think that's what's brilliant. When you see the road stretching off for miles and miles and miles, and you drive to those locations, I think it's great. It gives you that feeling of rally. We were saying that traveling from one place to another on a full 1-to-1 scale mountain, that's what they've built on these stages, and it's it's created authentic looking stages. And there we are. Now we're at that point that a few minutes ago was miles away, and we can see the mountain over there we were just driving around. Really impressive. Loving those rock textures, I will point out.
Yeah, I mean, they've just come on in leaps and bounds, haven't they? We've seen a very rough area here, and apparently the force feedback really fights you on these sections, doesn't it? Can you tell us a little bit more about these sort of sections, how they are?
So there's lots of you do feel a lot of rugged sort of bobbling in the wheel when you're turning in. You really do feel it moving around, and the car moving around. You feel like you have control. When you come off this onto the harder sort of sand, you feel more wheel spin. The suspension moves differently. You get a lot more wheel spin. You feel the car moving more smoothly. Obviously, you get a different type of feedback in terms of your steering. But you need to also understand what kind of tires you're on, what your style's going to be in your driving, how reserved are you being. Is there rain at the other end of the stage? Do you need to protect your tires, or do you need to push at this point? There's lots of little strategies that come in how you attack these surfaces as well. So, but you do feel radical difference in terms of surface change from one to another. And the stages like this in Argentina really are, as he flies across the finish line, really are quite rugged. Talking of which, then on to Argentina here. So this was my run on Argentina.
People
and people,
everywhere.
lots of people. They're still sort of building on these stages, but I think this is one of the more complete stages. I've run it here during clear weather conditions. I mentioned this in the preview, just because they obviously in the stream they showed it with weather conditions, and they had a cloud around the mountain. So as you drove down the mountain, you drove into the cloud and through into rain. But I thought, look at the sunlight, reflecting on the stones and the
it really highlights the surface detail, doesn't it?
And the views in the distance. I just want to point out the views. I mean, you can see for miles. I mean, literally the whole track, probably if you go off the edge, is all there. It's all there already laid out. It's impressive technology, and it's just when you think of where they've come from in WRC 5 and how impressed we were with WRC 7 in terms of radical change. They've really used their time to take it forward. And I think also, if you've seen Argentina in Dirt Rally 2 recently, you'll see you immediately recognize these locations. And I think that's the funny thing. It's what location do you think that is?
Very dry, very rugged, very rough, very challenging location, no doubt. But it's looking fantastic. Often in rally games, typically there'll be very sort of almost like corridor racing games where you just have a thin portion of track and you don't see very much outside of the track surface. But here you're seeing massive open areas, and like you say, you can drive to these places. So it really does give you the sense that you're actually driving at a real location, rather than sort of being funneled down a pathway with trees and things that sort of mimic the locations, various sort of wildlife and such. But here it really feels like you've got an open area and you're driving among this area and sort of weaving in and out, and occasionally you come across a big viewpoint like there on the left there, you see the mountains and such, and it just looks fantastic. It's amazing how far they've come, and it really sort of bodes well for the future of rally games and from Killerton as well. They're really pushing the envelope now, Dirt Rally 2 visually, this in terms of stage design. So an exciting future for sure for rally fans, isn't it?
Absolutely. One thing I will notice is how precariously placed some of the people are currently on this on this map. I know they're still working on it, but I do think, how on earth do people get to locations like that in real life? I mean, it's like they must park their cars sort of a couple of miles away and then take, 5 hours climbing a mountain getting to this point. I didn't see that corner at all. There's one thing is the sunlight's great, but sometimes when you've not got a co-driver, having a clue where you're going, and this road is very narrow, go offline, and there's some rock or something that's going to hit you. And again, there's sunlight, really nice effects. So it was very challenging. I actually, by this point, I was actually feeling a little bit mentally exhausted because obviously you're concentrating so heavily. But I mentioned in the video that the speed perception is good. So I was able to judge corners relatively well. I like the fast feeling of speed for the most part. Gives you a feeling that you're really going for it. And I think, I just hit that rock a bit too hard there. There are corners where normally a co-driver would say don't cut, and they're the ones that tend to affect us the most because we think we can cut the corner. And
there's always a few turns that catch drivers out. I mean, look at these bridges; they're really impressive, aren't they? I mean, the car can barely fit through the width there. So it's sort of moments like that you remember in stages. That I guess Dirt Rally 2 sort of lacked, didn't it? Those memorable moments. Whereas here you've got these amazing bridges and scenery and things like that you need, because you remember this game in 10 years' time. You'll remember those bridges probably. Those moments where you're holding your breath through them when you go through at speed. Games need things like that, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, I found that there are some elements. I mean, some of the bridges are present in Dirt Rally, but there's more in the way of grass and trees and greenery and other bits and pieces. The lighting here just standing out to me more, as well as the sort of rock system they're using on the ground. Again, you felt a radical difference here in terms of the surface. I was sliding the car a bit more here, you can see. Immediately I found I could break into the corner and slide the car a bit. And I was just trying to push a bit harder in terms of the sliding here. Wasn't able to there though. I realized I need to turn the car in a bit more aggressively. So you're really trying to understand the car. I think I get some wheel spin somewhere here where it is behaving slightly differently on this surface. There we go. That was just wheel spin there.
Yeah.
So I got on the power.
So not only do you have to adapt to the change in surfaces, you've also got dynamic weather as well, which we'll see a bit later. So you have all these various elements that change quite quickly. So it's very much a game that you're sort of constantly being challenged, not only by the environment, but by the track surfaces and also the weather. So it does add that nice challenge to proceedings that you're never quite sure what you're going to get, and with all the stages in the game as well, it's going to be quite something, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's an impressive array of, handling physics. I mean, we've been talking about physics, but they've really worked on the physics in this game to make it a sim in that sense. So there's a lot of simulation going on there. There's a lot of work going into force feedback and various elements that give player feedback. They're still working on that. At this point, they were still working on the brake. And there's a lot of work that's going to go into the force feedback to get it right, and a lot of feedback from the esport players. And that was one of the great things about having all these esport players there, because they play rally games all the time. They were able to give a lot of feedback collectively in terms of where they feel the car, where they don't feel the car, what they need to be feeling to understand what the car's doing in various conditions. And they've got the time to implement that, put it into the game. So, there's a lot going into that. And again, here we see Tarmac Rally. On Germany, which is very fast and fluid. We see it running here in dry weather conditions. It's, as we'll look at in a moment, it's even more impressive in the mixed weather conditions. In a way, in some respects, this rally wasn't graphically as detailed as some of the other new ones. However, it is very expansive. It's very high speed, as you can see here.
Very narrow as well.
Very narrow, very narrow. I mean, for example, you see the curb on the left there. I mean, you hit that incorrectly and it will just pull you into the wall. It's really, really tricky. You've got to know how to use it.
Yeah.
On the other side, if you hit the other side, you'll just spin out generally.
What
or
I
again,
like about
nip it. Yeah.
This is such a different challenge to the previous stage we've seen. A completely different technique involved here.
Yeah.
So you have that nice mix of countries and different challenges that go with it. And we're talking like 100 stages. We're talking 14 countries, a fantastically comprehensive package that's going to give us all these various different challenges, environments and weather effects. And, if it all comes together, it's going to be quite an amazing experience, isn't it, potentially?
Yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of foliage detail here. You've got very different type of driving, as you were saying. So you really need to get your head around.
I can see the leaves there hitting the green,
yeah,
a nice feeling of speed. And
that's right. The leaves help. I think
they add a lot, don't they?
They do. Oh, he just took off. And again, it just shows how he was quite on the limit there. And you take off incorrectly, and you can you've really got to know the stage in terms of when to slow. But obviously, a co-driver would tell you to slow a little bit for a bump or something.
Yeah.
And we're really looking forward to seeing what they do with the co-driver notes and improvements this year. There's still a lot to be revealed. And also, if you're watching this video now, obviously a lot of it's from bumper cam and the bonnet cam, hood cam for our US listeners, and the final game will have cockpit cam. They're working on that now and implementing that, put it into the game. I'm quite interested to see what they do with cockpit cam. There's some positive things being talked about, and we'll wait and see what they come up with there. But I think they want to make it a really realistic experience throughout.
They did mention on the stream that they've got a dash cam as well.
Yeah.
At the wheel, so that would be interesting to see. It's the first time actually that WRC will have dash cams. That's good to see.
Yeah, being able to remove the steering wheel is a big deal, and I'm really pleased they finally put that in. That was something I would have been very critical about, because I've been asking for it for years, and it's something they finally put in there. And it's a big difference to sim racers to be able to have their own wheel in front of them and then just have a dash cam and look out the window. It makes a big difference, and so that's going to be really authentic. And we look at what else they can do in terms of making that cockpit experience realistic.
The villages in the background there, it just, like you say, it just gives you that real authentic feeling that you're at a real place. You can see now the intense lushness of the foliage as well. It's really impressive, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you've got many different types of trees and bushes and everything else. It doesn't feel like a repetitive environment. Everything looks different. It looks weathered and worn. This is one of the best areas. I mean, look at that. It's a sort of wonderland of bushes and trees and wildlife up here. It really is, very impressive. And It'll be interesting to see how that compares to the real rally in many respects. But now we're looking at it again, different time of day, but with mixed weather conditions here. So again, you'll see the different challenges associated with it. And again, there's loads of work being done here. I will point out in graphics, in physics. None of this is complete in this game. So it's still a work in progress. But you'll see a different approach and also more use of the handbrake here as well. When you see the over the shoulder, you see just how much work is going on behind the wheels sometimes. It is pretty precise. But a lot of these players adapted so quickly to the various stages. It's such high speed. It's funny when you look at some of the previous sort of Germany rallies that have been in WRC, they've been so limited in comparison, whereas now we've got this nice sort of expansive road. So this was really impressive, and the players adapted to it very quickly. They were having sort of competitive runs and giving their feedback. But the feedback on the physics on the whole was really positive. Everyone feels like they've made good progress with the tyres, good progress with suspension. The weight transfer seemed to be working in a way that was working for everybody. I think the only things that people were still tweaking were braking, and there's some tweaking that I want to do there. And certainly in terms of the force feedback, they're happy with it on some surfaces more than others. So there's a lot to get feedback from the players on. Now, I don't think I did a little bit of driving on Germany, but I didn't really have time to. At the time, the wheel wasn't set up correctly for me. I have slightly less rotation than a lot of players, and so I wasn't able to really get a feel for it quite the way I was with the Argentina stage that I recorded. But it does take some getting into. I mean, one thing you'll notice with stages is the stages are very narrow, barely a car wide, most of them. Some of them are not even that. It felt like Argentina. It was really like threading a needle through some of those sections. I mean, the bridges are just horrible. And whereas some of this as well, some of these you can see him slowing slightly there because he didn't know what way to go. I can tell he's just thinking, right, am I going around here? No. Just gives you an idea how quick these players are, that even when they're on a road they don't know, they can adapt very quickly. So he just missed out about the handbrake
there.
Yeah, he did. He realized too late. So we've all been there. It's great to see. I mean, for me it was just recording these players and watching them learn. But when I saw at the end of the second day how quick they'd got in just 2 days, wow. I mean, those guys were flying, and I just realized, they are the top WRC sport players for a reason, and that's because they can really fly. Now you're seeing the weather conditions change. Clouds coming, road surface getting a bit more damp.
Nice rain effects, aren't they, on the screen?
They are nice rain effects, actually. They stood out quite quickly, and they give that nice authentic feel to this view. That's why I'm quite keen to see what they're going to do with the cockpit cam, because they
see the understeer there as well.
Yeah,
it looks very impressive. The reflections and such. It's looking nice, isn't it? The trees reflecting in the surface, that sort of nice sort of sheen of the wet, saturated track. So it's looking very good at this point, isn't it? Look at that! Wow.
Massive improvement. I mean, you've got pitted effect of the road getting wet. Oh, just over that. You see, that was the rain affected him there, nearly running the people over. That was the rain affected him a little bit there. And so you're going into a corner where you think, I can brake at this point. And suddenly the car's not going to have it. Suddenly he's getting wheel spin as well on acceleration that he wasn't getting before. And he's having to be more careful with the throttle. And look at the sun reflecting there.
You almost expect a rainbow at this point. It's quite convincing, isn't it? Look at that.
Yeah, the light through the tree there, if you notice. You've got your God rays through the tree. Look really nice.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, but do you see, we've gone from dry weather conditions where it all seemed quite straightforward to wet weather now, where progressive acceleration, longer braking distances, probably the wrong tires. But would you do this stage?
Top players as well.
He is. Well, I will say this: would you do this stage? The weather report tells you it's going to be rain. Do you want to do it on dry or wet tires? You'll be quick on the first half and slow on the second half, or you can be slow on the first half and quick on the second half. This is
the trees there.
Yeah, blowing in the wind
as well. Just interrupt there. Just looks so impressive. Look at that in the background as well. I mean, you don't see that really, do you, in games? So they're really shifting about. I mean, wow.
Proper hurricane now, isn't it?
It's well, you have storm weather in this game, don't you? I think there's hailstones as well. So they've got quite a mix of extreme weather conditions. But sorry, Alan, you were saying?
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, obviously, as we work our way up, let's look at that for a moment. I mean, it is great to see they've animated a proper wet conditions, isn't it? It looks nasty, that weather. Look at it. You don't want to be out there. It's blowing a gale. Feel quite cozy in the car.
It started off cozy, and it just sort of turned into this monster storm, didn't it? So it just goes to show that how much things can change. This is fully dynamic weather, as we understand it. So it's interesting that you start off in a sunny, wet, dry conditions, and you end up in a sort of monsoon or something. It's certainly going to throw up some dilemmas with the tyre choices.
It is with the tyre choice in the weatherman report, because the weatherman's going to get it wrong. Apparently, he's never going to be 100% the weatherman. There'll be
they never are, though, are they?
No, exactly, and that's the thing. You're going to have a weadherman who's going to say might rain, might not. There'll be percentages and stuff like that. You don't know. Yeah, you might have a storm, you might not. So, as I was saying, the main thing is tyres. So, when you start that stage, do you start on wets and be slow on the dry section, or do you start on? You can see corners like that occasionally where didn't know which way he was going there. We're on Chile now, of course.
Yeah.
So this is one of the new stages.
Nice. Yeah, very different again. Very different scene entirely, really, isn't it? So it's nice to have this. It's nice to have stages that look so different from each other. So instantly when you see it, you're like, oh, right, this is this stage. This is this one. This is here. It's nice to have that. And, it's got 14 countries in here. So if they can have countries that do look very different from one another, that would be a fantastic achievement, wouldn't it, for the team with such a range that they're having to put into the game.
Yeah, we've always talked about Kiloton being good at foliage, and they've really got some good foliage. So, I think in that sense they've got a lot of different elements that they're putting together. You've got these tall forests and different lighting here, very bright sort of bluish lighting. It changes the lighting and feel and look of each stage.
Slightly more
using the bumper cam. Yep.
Slightly less narrow this track, so it's almost like you can really sort of lay the hammer down a bit on this one.
You can, but then there are a lot of bumps. I mean, sections like this, which should be flat.
It is very bumpy, actually.
Sent him off the track. Yeah. That happened to me as well.
I saw that, and I figured he's going to put the foot down.
Yeah, all of us did that. No, you've got to know where the bumps are, and so you'll see the road. Look, it's that road ahead. We're not going there. So there's little bits where you can see for miles. You can see where you're going. But I think tracks like this, when you know where you're going, I mean, he's cruising by his standards here. When he's flat out, you're really going to go for it. But right now, bumps can really affect you if you don't know they're there and you don't have any co-driver. It's funny just how much we rely on the co-driver in a rally.
Yeah,
telling
It'd be interesting to see if the co-driver actually gives you warning of these troublesome bumps. Because if they're throwing you off the course, ideally you need
bump.
You need that
slow bump.
Yeah,
I think they're going to need something like that because, or even something that somehow tells you how to position the car on the bump, because sometimes you can take those bumps real quick if you know what side to position the car on. Yeah, and I suppose they do say that, bump middle or something like that. It depends what kind of co-driver commands and detail they're going to go with in terms of feedback, because some of these elements are quite unique to that section. You're not going to encounter it very often. So. But the car does move around a lot on its suspension. The tyres and everything. It's a lot more work. You see, he's having to work a lot more just to keep the car in the right direction. But again, here, nice views in the distance. We're travelling along at a fair old pace towards those trees, and slowing it right down, getting into that corner, and away we go. So it's again, we talked about earlier about the views and developing the handcrafted stages, which all look really nice. More flat out, more open. But there's a real range. I remember just a few years ago when rally games were just sort of corner into corner into corner into corner.
Yeah.
And now we've got proper fast sections which stretch out for miles. And it's going to be nice to see in the replays if we have a big accident there. Wow. It'll be nice to see in the replays because they're going to have a drone cam, helicopter cam, and they're redoing the replay cameras. Obviously, that's going to be helpful for the esports.
Lots more people there, I notice, and tents and stuff, giving it a bit more atmosphere, which is good.
Yeah, nice to have a few people there. I mean, I think in a way we can never have enough people, can we, in these games, But on to Monte Carlo now, just a limited bit of footage on Monte Carlo. Actually, Monte Carlo was one of my favourite looking of the rallies that they were showing us. We're not going to show a lot of this because it's still very much a work in progress. So do bear in mind they're still working a lot on tarmac detail and weather conditions here. So as we go up the hill, there won't be as much, or there won't be snow on the road yet. They're still working
through there. Did you see that section?
It was.
There?
Really tight.
That's hold your breath stuff. Again, though, it's another track here that looks different from what we've seen so far, which is really positive to see, you know.
I mean, for me, I love the trees, the look of the trees. I like the rock textures. I like the way the rock textures change color. I like the feeling of speed.
Very challenging.
Yeah, very challenging. You can see here, again, you know, he's probably had, one go on this, and now he's flying around because the car's behaving in an intuitive way. You know, I mean, that's what's great about it. It's not like the players were playing it and thinking, I can't drive this. Don't get me wrong. A lot of them on their first go were flying into this wall and that wall and figuring it out, as we all were. But then as soon as they got their head around it, but I get it. I understand, like the handbrake there. Wow, you feel the analog handbrake now. It works.
Modern rally cars have tons of grip, and they are relatively easy to drive. I guess the real challenge will come from taming the historic cars that are in the game.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a big challenge driving those cars. They've already said they are going to be a hell of a challenge to drive. Just a note here to the mountain. I wanted to show this because you drive towards it and you drive up it and you see the track going all the way up it. It's great. I mean, it's that sort of level of detail that you see, and how the environment's changed as we worked our way up. So yeah, they've got to add the weather and the snow conditions to this. That's all being added in the coming weeks. But I wanted to show a little bit of this because it does look so good.
It almost looks like we've headed into another season now from what we started. As we travel up the mountain, of course, as you go up, it gets colder and colder. So it's really sort of replicating that sort of altitude, isn't it, with the various sort of snow-filled banks now. So it's really interesting how much a track can evolve due to environmental conditions or rain or whatever from the start of a track to, say, the middle or the end of a course. So
and again, what tyres are you going to use? Are you going to use dry tyres? You can use wet tyres. It's going to get wetter or more snow as you go up the hill. So again, do you use fast tyres for the bottom and slow tyres for the top, or the other way around? There's lots of strategy. It's going to be in there. So no, it's been good actually seeing all these stages so far. Still a lot of work going into the game. It's not out until September. They've got a lot of time still to develop it. They're taking on board all the feedback from the players. They're still, developing the weather and textures and adding people and other elements to all these stages. So it's not all finished yet. But I wanted to show you a couple of these stages because I think this looks really good already. And I know when they finished it, it's going to look even better. So loads of elements coming for this. And you can see the way the moisture's gradually coming in terms of the rain starting as we get further up the hill and the conditions sort of deteriorate. And you'll see that getting darker and darker and the tarmac getting wetter and wetter. I mean, wow, super challenging. And you could see when he was driving, I could see at the time he was getting a lot of wheel spin and really struggling as he went further up the hill here. But he did really well with these sections.
Those bridges are so tight that, there's several different types of bridges, but they all seem to be very tight, don't they? So, wow, it's going to be challenging. But yeah, lovely effects. Again, rain effects. You see the trees blowing occasionally in the wind as well. And it really, almost getting a chill down my spine watching this. It does translate the weather very well. I mean, look at those reflections. They've come on leaps and bounds, haven't they, in just a few short years?
They have. It's been great to see. And of course, we're coming to the end of this preview, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this little chat. Do leave your questions in the description. There'll be more previews to come. But that's WRC 8 coming out in September. And there'll be more from me and Kevin very soon.